Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam class. So we'll start with Jai Radha Madhav. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari O Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari O Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari O Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari O Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari O Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. O Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. O Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva, Gurudeva, Srila Gurudeva. O Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur. O Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur. जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंसा परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी इति नामिनी की जय। श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। हरे कृष्ण। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायण नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाखया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। Hare Krishna. So we're going to continue our reading today from Canto 3, Chapter 6, which is titled Creation of the Universal Form. And we are going to be discussing from text number 11 to 34. And we're going to deep dive into text number 34 today. So the theme here so far is, or the context, what's happening here is Maitreya and Vidura are speaking. And Vidura, he has been going on a pilgrimage. He met Uddhava just when Uddhava had listened to Uddhav Gita from Krishna. And when Vidura met Uddhav and asked him questions about transcendental knowledge, Uddhava actually went into a trance. He went to the spiritual world, and after he came back, he was he was so deeply touched with what had happened, and he explained to Maitreya about, he explained to Vidura, thank you, he explained to Vidura about how all the relatives had left, and Krishna had also disappeared. At that time, Vidura asked for more questions to understand transcendental knowledge, and Uddhav instructed him that you can now go to Maitreya, who was very close by, who was also present when he was listening to Uddhav Gita, and he would be able to explain to you a little bit more. So Vidura approached Maitreya. He's, by the river Ganges, and he asks Maitreya many questions. Because of his humility, he first asks him questions about, what was in the Mahabharata. But then he also shares that he has listened to Mahabharata from his own father, Vyasadeva, and he wasn't satisfied because those were mundane topics. And the reason why Vyasadeva had written those topics was to attract people, common people, to the spiritual knowledge. So then he asks Maitreya about questions which were pertaining to Krishna, so he could go a little bit more deeper. So now we are here in this chapter where Maitreya is explaining to Vidura about the creation of the universal form. He explains how Krishna, the first plenary expansion, he also explains the secondary plenary expansion. He explains from the second plenary expansions how we have the Mahavishnu. From Mahavishnu we get Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. From Garbhodakshaya Vishnu we get Shirodakshaya Vishnu, right? And Shirodakshaya Vishnu is in each one of us as Param Atma. His lotus feet are with us all the time. So now Maitreya is explaining about how the creation of the universal form comes about. Why does the creation of the universal form come about? So what happens is, Maitreya explains that Krishna comes into all the elements, and from all the elements come all the demigods. And when the demigods arrive, they have a purpose, and their purpose was to create. However, they didn't know how to do it. They weren't clear about their occupational duty. And that's when they prayed. They prayed to Krishna. They went to Lord Brahma and then they prayed to Krishna that, please show us your universal form. And that's when Krishna revealed his universal form. And we're discussing that piece right now. So text number 11. Would somebody like to read, please? We don't have a mic. Okay. So shall I just read for devotees online? Okay. Text 11. Maitreya said, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form." Text 12. Agni, or heat, separated from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. So pay attention. I'm going to ask, who entered where? So the first one was Agni, or heat. He separated from his mouth and he entered into the mouth. So from the mouth, fire came out of the universal form, and that's where Agni was. And by that, what happened? The living entities could express themselves in words. Text 13. When the palette of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of air in the planetary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue. Yes? It does. Varuna is the director of air, right? Water. So we should let BBT know, right? So they can correct it in the next edition. I don't know what edition is this. So this was 93. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. So when the palette of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of water, in the planetary systems entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue. Text 14. When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the dual Ashwini Kumaras entered them in their proper positions, and because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything. So who entered into the mouth? Agni. Who entered into the palate? Varuna. Varuna was the director of water. Who entered into the nostrils? The dual Ashwini Kumaras. And from that we could smell the aromas of everything. Text 15. Thereafter the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, the director of light, entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms. Text 16. When there was a manifestation of skin separated from the gigantic form, Anila, the deity directing the wind, entered with partial touch, and thus the living entities can realize tactile knowledge. 17. When the ears of the gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered into them with the hearing principles, by which all the living entities hear and take advantage of sound. 18. When there was a separate manifestation of skin, the controlling deities of sensations and their different parts entered into them. And thus, the living entities feel itching and happiness due to touch. 19. When the genitals of the gigantic form separately became manifest, then Prajapati, the original living creature, entered into them with his partial semen, and thus the living entities can enjoy sex pleasure. Text 20. The evacuating channel separately became manifest, and the director named Mitra entered into it with partial organs of evacuation. Thus, the living entities are able to pass stool and urine. 21. Thereafter, when the hands of the gigantic form separately became manifest, Indra, the ruler of heavenly planets, entered into them, and thus the living entity is able to transact business for his livelihood. So who entered into the ears? Yes. And who entered into the skin? Huh? Anila, yes, skin, correct. Okay, good. Hare Krishna. And who entered into the arms or hands? Indra. And with that, what happened? The living entities could transact business for their livelihood. 22. Thereafter, the legs of the gigantic form separately became manifest, and the demigod named Vishnu, not the personality of Godhead, entered with partial movement. This helps the living entity move to his destination. When the intelligence of the gigantic form separately became manifest, Brahma, the Lord of the Vedas, entered into it with partial power of understanding, and thus an object of understanding is experienced by the living entities. 24. After that, the heart of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered the moon demigod with partial mental activity. Thus, the living entity can conduct his mental speculations. It's interesting, right? Like the moon demigod actually entered into the heart and not the mind. And after entering into the heart, the living entity could conduct the mental speculations because of that. 25. Thereafter, the materialistic ego of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered Rudra, the controller of false ego, with his own partial activities, by which the living entity transacts his objective actions. 26. Thereafter, when his consciousness separately manifested itself, the total energy, Mahat Tattva, entered with his conscious part. Thus, the living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge. So, who entered into the arms? Indra. Who entered into the legs? The demigod Vishnu, yes. And once he entered into the legs, what were we able to do? We could walk for movement. And who entered into the heart? Moon god, yes, Soma. And Rudra entered into the materialistic ego. And because of that, the living entities transact their objective actions. Yes? Yeah.
So many things they say are
Partial. What do you think? Take a guess. So the question is that many of these say partial expansions, right? Only the partial, with their own partial activities, not the complete. Om Purnam. Om Purnam. Yeah. So same quality, but in less quantity. But with that same quality, they could actually have those objective actions for the living entity. Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Text 26. Thereafter, when his consciousness separately manifested itself, the total energy, Mahat Tattva, entered in his conscious part. Thus, the living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge. 27. Thereafter, from the head of the gigantic form, the heavenly planets were manifested, and from his legs, the earthly planets, and from his abdomen, the skies separately manifested themselves. Within them, the demigods, and others also were manifested in terms of the modes of material nature. Yes, Hare Krishna. 26.
He's saying that the Mahatattva, which is material energy, entered within his conscious part, and thus the living entity was able to conceive specific knowledge. It seems like consciousness is coming from material energy.
So my understanding is when Krishna, from his glance, sees the pradhan, through time and the false ego, the living entities entered into the pradhan, and that became the Mahat Tattva. So the Mahat Tattva is time and false ego when it's combined. And I think because it's in the material nature, because of Krishna's glance, the consciousness is coming from the Mahat Tattva.
So the consciousness is the souls that are contained within the glance of Vishnu, and then he's glancing over the material energy, and Lord Shiva is giving us the false ego, Ahankara, giving us that identity with the material energy. So we're existing prior to this.
Correct.
And then we're being carried in the glance of Vishnu.
Yes.
So our eternal spiritual identity is existing prior to the creation.
Correct. So we are Satchidananda. And as soon as we come into this material modes, the three modes, we get riveted. We get riveted that we start feeling like, this is me, this is my body, this is my arm, this is my watch, So we get riveted. We have these designations. Oh, I'm a Prabhu, I'm a Mataji. So I think that's what it is. So.
Just one more question.
Yes, Prabhu.
We have that philosophical argument that we give people when preaching that, I'm not my nose, and I'm not my eye. Or you say my nose, my eye, my heart, my leg. But you also say my soul.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't say I soul.
Yes.
So it seems like it's a self-defeating philosophical argument.
Really good point.
We're giving that as an argument to prove that you're the soul and not the body. How would you explain that?
So we are the soul. We are the soul.
When you
However,
say the soul, you say my soul. You never say I am the soul. We do say I am the soul, right? But I never say I soul.
I soul.
I never think of myself as a soul. I don't wake up in the morning and think I'm soul.
But that's the point. We are trying to get to that point that we're able to not only just read, but realize that we are the soul.
So what is that point? You wake up and you're totally detached from your material body and you're just in an ecstatic spiritual
I haven't experienced it, but what I've read or what I've heard is that right now we are so riveted to this material body that we start thinking that each one of these parts is actually us. However, the purpose of our life is for us to be able to come to the point that actually we are not this body. We are the spirit spark. We are the soul. And at that point, the soul expands and becomes the spiritual body. And we are then able to understand who we really are, who is Krishna, and what is my eternal relationship to Krishna. Like right now we have all these occupational duties which we're doing, and we're sometimes forced to do these activities. But in our spiritual form, we still have activities to do for Krishna. However, it is just our inclination. We're doing it out of love.
I see. My point is, my question is, how do we know when I'm riveted? In other words, what's the difference between me just hallucinating that I'm, a gopi and you're Govind, or I'm a soul that's just formless, or that has no person, that has no real identity? What is that unriveted distinction?
So Srila Prabhupada, and all our acharyas say that we don't want to artificially start to imagine who we are in the spiritual world. Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Radha Kalachandji ki jai. However, we want to be able to come to that position that I am actually an eternal servant of Krishna. Right now we are thinking that I am the boss, and whoever I see around me should serve me. However, everybody's feeling the same way. And that's why there's so many disconnects. when we come to the point that I'm actually a spirit spark, I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, I am serving somebody who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at that point we start to understand that, yes, I am a spirit spark.
So every time I say to myself that I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, at that point I'm unriveted?
No.
At that point I'm free from material energy? Philosophically. So now we're distinguishing between philosophical philosophy and reality.
So, hope that was okay. Okay, should we go to the next text?
Sorry, I hope I'm not a disturbance.
No, that was...
Just had a question, and I thought we're always giving that argument and
Yeah. No, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's very important that, we are able to discuss these things, because only when we are clear, we'll be able to go and share that knowledge with others. So thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Prabhu. Jai Shri Radha Kala Ji ki Jai. Okay, so text 27. Did we read 27 already? No. Okay, 27. Thereafter, from the head of the gigantic form, the heavenly planets were manifested. From his legs, the earthly planets, and from his abdomen, the sky separately manifested themselves. Within them, the demigods and others also were manifested in terms of the modes of material nature. 28. The demigods, qualified by the super excellent quality of the mode of goodness, are situated in the heavenly planets, whereas the human beings, because of their nature in the mode of passion, live on the earth in company with their subordinates. 29. Living entities who are associates of Rudra, develop in the third mode of material nature, or ignorance. They are situated in the sky, between the earthly planets and the heavenly planets. 30. O chief of the Kuru dynasty, the Vedic wisdom became manifested from the mouth of the Virat, the gigantic form. Those who are inclined to this Vedic knowledge are called Brahmanas, and they are the natural lead teachers and spiritual masters of all the orders of society. So now Maitreya is speaking about the Varnashram Dharma. So he's coming to that point. So the first one was the Brahmanas. They are coming from the mouth of the Virat form. Text 31. Thereafter, the power of protection was generated from the arms of the gigantic Virat form. And in relation to such power, the Kshatriyas also came into existence by following the Kshatriya principle of protecting society from the disturbance of thieves and miscreants. 32. The means of livelihood of all persons, namely production of grains and their distribution to the prajas, or the population, was generated from the thighs of the Lord's gigantic form. The mercantile men who take charge of such execution are called Vaishyas. Thereafter, 33, thereafter service was manifested from the legs of the personality of Godhead for the sake of perfecting the religious function. Situated on the legs are the Shudras who satisfy the Lord by service. So where did the Brahmanas come out from? From the mouth. Kshatriyas from the arms. The Vaishyas, the thighs, and the Shudras from the legs. From the thighs. Thighs. The thighs, yes. 34. So, huh? Yes, you have a question, Prabhu? So we'll read the purport of 34 and then we'll have discussion. 34. Because of we are short on time, I'll just read the translation and purport. Translation. All these different social divisions are born with their occupational duties and living conditions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All these different social divisions, there were 4 divisions, what we just read. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Since they are born from different parts of the body of the Supreme Lord in his gigantic form, all living entities in all parts of the entire universe are supposed to be eternal servitors of the Supreme Body. Every part of our own body, such as the mouth, hands, thighs, and legs, is meant to render service to the whole. That is their constitutional position. In subhuman life, the living entities are not conscious of this constitutional position. But in the human form of life, they are supposed to know this through the system of the Varnas, the social orders. As above mentioned, the Brahmana is the spiritual master of all the orders of society, and thus Brahmanical culture, culminating in the transcendental service of the Lord, is the basic principle for purifying the soul. In conditioned life, the soul is under the impression that he can become the Lord of the universe. And the last point of this misconception is to think oneself the supreme. The foolish, conditioned soul does not take into account that the Supreme cannot be conditioned by Maya or illusion. If the Supreme were to become conditioned by illusion, where would be his supremacy? In that case, Maya or illusion would be the Supreme. Therefore, Because the living entities are conditioned, they cannot be supreme. The actual position of the conditioned soul is explained in this verse. All the conditioned souls are impure due to contact with the material energy in three modes of nature. Therefore, it is necessary that they purify themselves under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, who not only is a Brahmana by qualification, but must also be a Vaishnav. The only self-purifying process mentioned herein is to worship the Lord under the recognized method, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. That is the natural way of purification, and no other method is recommended as bona fide. The other methods of purification may be helpful to come to this stage of life, but ultimately one has to come to this last point before he attains actual perfection. Bhagavad Gita 7:19 confirms this truth as follows. Bahinam janmanam ante jnanavam mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatma sudurlabha. So I'll just make a quick point before I open it up for discussion. So here in this verse, Maitreya is explaining to Vidura that the occupational duties are for every living entity. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that even he does activities. And the reason he does activities is not because he needs to do them, not that because he needs to get something out of them. He does it so common men can follow. Right? As a leader, he's setting the right guidelines. So we all do occupational duties. As soon as we are babies, right? Even babies have some duty to cry and to get milk, right? And as they grow older, they have some chores which they have to do at home. So each one of us has some occupational duties. However, Maitreya here is explaining that just by doing your occupational duties, we can actually come to the point of getting purified, right? However, to do those occupational duties, it's very important that we approach a spiritual master. A spiritual master is somebody who is not only a Brahman, but also a Vaishnav. Why is that? The reason is that a spiritual master can actually understand from who we are that what occupational duty can this person perform, which can actually help them to get purified. So when we actually approach a spiritual master and we perform our occupational duty, whatever he's instructed, we come to the path of actually getting purified in that occupational duty. So this is what Maitreya is explaining to Vidura, that all the different social divisions were born from Krishna. So we are all coming from Krishna. We are supposed to serve Krishna. We are not independent. And just by following our occupational duty, which has been prescribed by our spiritual master, who is not only a Brahman but also a Vaishnav, we will be able to purify ourselves and come to the understanding that we are not this material body, but we are a spirit spark. And our only purpose is to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we'll take Prabhu's question. Yes, Prabhu.
This brings up a few points. The first point I wanted to discuss is, if we look at the examples of Pandavas, they were Kshatriyas, they weren't Brahmins. Does that mean they weren't spiritual masters and they were not purified?
So the question you're asking is, the Pandavas were Kshatriyas by nature, and as a Kshatriya, they were trying to protect the citizens. So the question is that because they were Kshatriyas, are they not spiritual masters?
And not purified.
And not purified.
Brahmins, they haven't considered Kshatriyas, they haven't looked at.
So I think what we read from the purport is that a spiritual master is not only a Brahman but also a Vaishnav. Now, because the Pandavas were Kshatriyas, that doesn't mean that they were not pure devotees of Krishna. So this is the point which Maitreya is making here to Vidura, that there are 4 different social divisions which are born. However, when any social division are doing their occupational duty by approaching a spiritual master being a Brahman and a Vaishnav, they can actually get purified. So, in terms of the Pandavas, they were eternal associates of Krishna. So they are, in sense, pure devotees of Krishna already. They're just coming here to play a pastime for Krishna. But for us, even though we have any occupational duty we have, if we perform that just with one and only one goal, which is to serve Krishna, to please Krishna, that is transcendental service. That would be devotional service.
Is that person a Brahmin?
Excuse me?
Is that person a Brahmin?
No. It can be anybody. Each one of us.
But it says the spiritual master must be Brahmin and Vaishnava. So I'm just wondering if a person's not a Brahmin and their occupational duties are within the mode of passion, how are we to accept them as spiritual roles? Like, why would Muhammad have been born as Kshatriyas if they were in the mode of goodness and still associates? They should have been born in the mode of goodness, right? According to this section.
Well, you just remarked was. He was a Rajri, so he wasn't a normal one staff. But you have to get specific.
No, that's why I'm asking
He
these
said
points.
positive, but then you have to look at you here.
Okay.
He was not a normal shepherd. He was a shepherd, but he was also a priest. He was qualified.
I mean, most of the people speaking about it are Kshatriyas.
Okay, we have a few hands up.
Go ahead, you guys.
Nanda Braja Prabhu.
Sure.
From what I understand, is that Brahmin, Kshatriya, or a Vaishya can take Brahmin initiation.
Correct.
Vishnudev is a Kshatriya. It's also known as the spiritual teacher, the spiritual master of all Pandavas. So, by quality, these people have risen above the material designations of these different varnas, and they are Brahmin in quality. And so therefore they take Brahmin initiation, they're able to give instruction, and they can take a person who takes shelter of them and bring them up to the quality of the Brahmin also.
That's a great point. Yes.
I see some people shake their head no, that's not correct.
Yes.
Go ahead, you guys. Please, give your answer.
We have. Yes, not by birth, but by nature. Nice, thank you. I'm Prabhu.
But if you have rabbinical qualities, you should be respected as a Brahmin, regardless. Right?
Yes. Yes.
So you know we're bringing another different status.
Rabbinical is one thing, but if you're trained by, like you're saying, the sutras, so but if somebody's in that mode of, but then they become devotees, that's a different classification. The Vaishnava classification is different than, it's within the
Yes.
ashram, but also it's the transcendental, like what we're saying, the whole point is that the guru teaches us how to serve Krishna within a particular varna situation. So, just like there are so many in Dwarka, there was thousands and thousands of prostitutes that accompanied Krishna on his trips and they're all great devotees. Probably just dedicated his entire purport about them and their
Nice. Thank you. Mataji, you had a point?
You have to speak up, we really can't hear you.
Yeah. No, Mataji is saying that she had the same point which Nanda Brajaprabhu made. Thank you. Okay. Did anybody else have a point? I saw some other hands up. Yes, Prabhu. Pan. Okay. All right, we'll stop here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna. Dhanvat Pranam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.